And there were many things. We were also a Christian family, and the KGB was after us. We didn't know, but there were rats in our apartment, not physical rats, but stool pigeons. And the KGB somehow knew that we were getting communion and being taught the Bible, and because my dad used to sneak priests in and stuff. And so the KGB knew everything about us, and so they were, you know, they were on us, and they were going to arrest my dad. And so my dad stood up for human rights, and my mom stood up for human rights, and we were persecuted by that regime. My dad signed many petitions on behalf of political prisoners against, you know, Soviet totalitarianism. And we were one of the lucky ones. We just barely got out in 1972 because of Brezhnev's détente with Nixon. The Soviet Union sometimes didn't know what to do. Does it kill its dissidents, put them in the gulag, put them in the psychiatric hospital, or just throw them out? So temporarily it thought the best idea is just throw some of them out. So we got out, and but I didn't forget, in the sense that what I mean is I was 5 years old, but I was already slightly, obviously traumatized because we were waiting for this. And there's no lawyer in the Soviet Union. My father was waiting for arrest at any moment, and we knew it was coming because one of our neighbors had admitted that she had been stool pigeoning on us for many years to the KGB. By the way, she killed herself afterwards. Now here's what I want to say. I got to the United States. I was 5.5 years old, and my mom says that I used to just stay there, and my jaw was just dropped open, looking at the stores, in the supermarkets, at the bananas and the toys and McDonald's. By the way, I just forgot a bonus question. That's my dad. My mom is on our left-hand side. That's my older sister. Can anybody guess where I am for a free book? Okay, I'm the little one. Sorry, I need a little bit of attention sometimes. But anyway, this picture was taken right before we left the Soviet Union. And that was our family that got out, and we left a lot of people behind. One second. So I want to just leave it on here for a minute, because this is what we're fighting. Now, when I came to the United States, I was only 5.5, but I'll tell you, even though I didn't intellectually understand what freedom was, I knew, I could smell it, and it was such an exhilarating experience to be in America. And even though I was 5.5, I just fell in love with America, and I love this country. And my parents, I remember there wasn't that terror in our family anymore, and I kind of lost the need to apologize, but it's still with me sometimes. That was a joke. So, and my parents weren't afraid anymore, and it was just in terms of everything. You can imagine it coming from that monstrosity, how beautiful it was to start living in the United States. And then all of a sudden, as I'm young, my father was a professor, these people start coming to the house. And by the way, I'm just in love with America, the toys, you know, and obviously what I sense already is the relaxation, the freedom, the exhilaration of freedom. And all of a sudden there's these people in our house. Yuri, you fascist! Oh, Yuri, you're really being a racist. Yuri, the Soviet Union is not such a bad place. And etc., etc., etc. Now, as I grew older, I saw these people coming into our house because they're academics. But they were always insulting my father and my mother. They were very cruel. And we were the fascists, we were the racists. And they were reprimanding our family because where we came from was a good place, and where we lived was a horrible place. Yuri, don't you understand that the United States is just as bad, as not worse than the Soviet regime, etc., etc. But they wanted my mom and dad to shut up. And this was really heartbreaking for my mom and my dad. You can imagine dissidents coming to America thinking that they would be supported, but instead they're being silenced. Now at that stage, even my mom till this day still tells me, oh, she says, you know, at least back then, okay, there were those, I'm I'm trying not to use a bad word, but she doesn't like those people, let's just put it that way. But she says at least back then there was a Ronald Reagan, or there was a Richard Nixon, or there were still at least people fighting for us in government. Whereas today with Obama, I mean, you can just imagine the disillusion of people fighting for freedom on the other side.
Or here.
Absolutely. So let me just say that I began to be very hurt by these people, and I began, I guess, to hate them. And I'm sorry, I'm often told that hate is a strong word and to try to forgive, etc. I'm making an attempt at it, but I have very, very strong negative feelings against these people. And now, so let me just tell you a few of my anecdotes, a little bit of my run-ins, instead of giving you a long, maybe detailed, boring lecture. I just want to speak a little bit from a personal angle of what the left is. So there's the example. So I'm growing up kind of worried about Alexander Solzhenitsyn and about Bukowski and about Alexander Ginsburg, and I'm worried about back home where a lot of my family had been killed, a lot of our relatives had disappeared in the Gulag, and this is what I grew up with. And my heart was with those people, and I loved the country where I was, and I wanted to fight on behalf of persecuted people, and the left did this. The left, and you know what it does, that if you talk about Stalin's victims, or you're all familiar with Noam Chomsky, he was trying to deny what Pol Pot did in Cambodia for the longest time. And you know, the left is really into Gulag denial about what Mao did, etc., etc. And so let me just tell a few little anecdotes of where I'm coming from. I started going to university and I pursued a PhD in graduate studies. And I'll tell you just some of my experiences of what has ended up with me being here. There's a radical feminist sitting at a table with me in a graduate lounge. Women have to wear bikinis in this culture. That's the way that capitalism, that is the way, for some reason my screen is gone. That is the way that capitalism decapitates women. That is the way that capitalism forces women into spheres of powerlessness. And you know, I myself was kind of listening, I'm nodding a little bit, I'm a little bit scared because if she gains power, I might as well commit suicide, because I don't want to live in a society where women don't wear bikinis, but that's another matter. But so I'm nodding, and and then after that I say, okay, well, just let me ask you this. How about, yeah, the screen is just. Oh, thank you. And so you know, I'm nodding, and then afterwards I say, okay, well, at least this is great. You're concerned about women's rights. Okay, good. Like, I'm a little bit confused actually what you're talking about, but this is good. So let's keep talking. 6,000 girls a day have their clitorises cut off under Islamic gender apartheid. Maybe you're interested in this. Forced marriages, honor killings, forced segregation, acid thrown in women's faces, disfiguring them because they won't wear veils. Yeah, hey, can you help me out? I got a couple petitions here. Who are we to say what's right or wrong? Are you a fascist? Who are we to judge other cultures? And something's not right here. And so year after year after year, I'm bumping into these people, and every time you bring up a monstrosity that's committed by an adversarial regime, they're apologizing. They're saying you don't have the right to say what's right or wrong, but then the topic of Jerry Falwell comes up, and all of a sudden cultural relativism goes right out the window. So, you know, so I'm around this all the time where they're, you know, they're for women's rights, but somehow abortion is the only right a woman's supposed to have, but a woman doesn't have the right to take a veil off and not have acid thrown in their face. But they're not interested. And they call me a fascist for being interested. So, one of my interests, you can imagine, is the Soviet Union. And for many years I studied the Cold War. because this is what I'm interested in. And I'm talking about 10, 15 years of arguing, debating with my colleagues, historians, about the Cold War. And deep down, some of them were very evidently honest about this, but others, they hid it, but you could tell. But they were on the side of the Soviet Union. We all know that, right? In terms of the left. And they played this moral equivalency, but we knew whose side they were on. But they were always arguing all this stuff. Alger Hiss was innocent, Alger Hiss was innocent, you know, and we argued about the Vietnam War. We argued about the Korean War. We argued about Stalin getting the bomb, etc., 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 etc. The Soviet Union collapses. By the way, they get really depressed when that happened, but that's another story. So they get really depressed. Jamie, there's no alternative to capitalism anymore. That's what I used to hear from them. But, so it ends, and all of a sudden, there's a whole, for a brief moment, declassified archives, declassified documents. Venona transcripts were released. All this declassified information. By the way, get John Haynes, Harvey Clare's book, The Rise and Fall of the Spies, The Rise and Fall of the KGB in America, all documented, proving that McCarthy had underestimated Soviet penetration of American society. I'm not necessarily justifying every tactic he had, because some of the tactics he had, for me, I disagree with, and I think he hurt the cause of anti-communism. But his cause and what he represented, it turns out that he had actually underestimated the Soviet penetration of America. Now anyway, so I come to my colleagues. So anyways, about Alger Hiss, look at this. Oh, by the way, about the Korean War, look at this. Oh, by the way, about Stalin getting the bomb, look at this. Oh, Glazov is chasing old ghosts. Glazov is engaged in necrophilia. Anyway, I am being ridiculed now for being interested in the past by historians. So they were ridiculing me that I'm chasing old ghosts. I can tell this today, and I appreciate your laughter. I actually think it's very funny, on the one hand, if we made it into a Dave Chappelle episode or something. But it was also very hurtful, and I was very angry. And by the way, from a lot of my dealings, maybe I learned too late, I just don't argue with leftists anymore, or I pick and choose, but it is such a secular faith, it is such a religion. They don't care about the facts, because they care about something else. But that taught me, that also, I was just after, oh my God, after 20 years, I come with the evidence. And, you know, so with Alger Hiss for a minute, do you know what the latest thing is? Okay, first they say he was innocent, then he's proven guilty, but, you know, he had to do what he did. And now, Stoughton Lind, a revisionist historian in the United States, is actually praising the Rosenbergs now for not snitching on the other spies. But 20 years ago, he was arguing that they were innocent. You know, they go through these stages. So it's very interesting. So I'm very fascinated in what's underneath there. Because these people that are telling me, no, Alger Hiss is innocent, I already know it's not even about Alger Hiss, because when I prove that he's guilty, it's going to be something else. So I was very fascinated in this pathology. It's such a serious mental illness that I became very I was just fascinated and also very hurt. Then 9/11 happened. I have to be honest with you, I was scared to come out of my house because, fortunately or unfortunately, I was around a lot of leftist communities. And that, by the way, this is why believe me, why I'm allowed to write United in Hate, is I spent a lot of time with leftists in academia and in these artsy communities, etc. Sometimes unwillingly, but I was around them. So 9/11 happens, and 9/11 happens, and I'm afraid to come out of my house because in my heart, I have to tell you that I love America so much, and it was so hurtful to me